Dragger, an original novel by Robert Napier, narration and images powered by AI. Chapter 4. Witness. Dex spent the rest of the day playing with Runty. His excited squeaks and squeals attracted the attention of the other Gores, but they were wary of Dex and her tendency to whack their snoots. With her help, she was sure Runty could catch up to the others in no time. The next morning, she and Runty were able to hold off Pusher and Shover long enough to get some good portions of food. Dex could guard an edge of the slop pile while Runty ate, and then he could wiggle and skip enough to distract his siblings while she filled her pocket. After eating, which was really a tiring business, Dex returned to the lower chamber for another story. Trek was ready this time. He had spent his solitude thinking how he might make a compelling story for his little friend, and also teach her something of the world, her world, that she didn't even know she'd lost. Rowan and I were mounted on horseback, followed by a square of footmen. We met several Dons at the end of the Arvindor Bridge. Trek galloped around the fire as best he could with a hurt leg, pretending to be on a horse. Our company was instantly recognizable as Vinian Knights, great warriors of the Chosen Empire. How did they recognize them? Asked Dex. Trek had promised himself he wouldn't get annoyed with her this time. He had to think. He had been raised among the Vin. It never occurred to him to wonder what they were like. The shine of armor gleaming, he said. Not blindingly, not like a paladin knight that never meets the enemy on fields. It shines here and there through layers of grit and mud. Dex had never seen a knight anyway, so it was hard to tell what she was picturing. Trek added the discipline, the rhythm of their march, and the long swords on their backs. That's how you recognize a knight of Vin. Dex was determined to remember that, and to be on the lookout for anyone matching that description. I barely restrained my steed in time. Trek resumed acting, casting himself in heroic style. My stallion circles and stomps, breathless and agitated. I am Tyrrhic Dweller, commander of the Deltaic Legion. We are pursuing Crushan assassins. They are attempting to enter your neutral provinces. Stand aside. That's what I told them. Told who? To the Dons that were waiting for us on the bridge. Oh, right. Dex had definitely forgotten what they were talking about. Another mounted knight, clad in gold, came up beside me. The young Don steadied my steed and aimed it towards the fleeing Crushans. Trek changed his voice up and down to match the speakers. He made the Don voice a little higher and his own a little deeper. No need to explain. We're all Joes here. We Dons know the crooked ways of the Crush better than most, said the sentry. Then why do you halt us? Let us pass at once. Thought you should know. Crushan soldiers settled into Nethertyne last night. I looked askance at my compatriot. Rowan hesitated to respond. I spurred my horse forward. With a heavy sigh, the Golden Knight joined the charge, and a dozen Chosen warriors followed. I and my Golden Lieutenant, Rowan Walker, rode far ahead of the others who were on foot. We hoped to catch the two interlopers before they reached the village of Nethertyne. That's in Joda, said Dex quietly, not meaning to interrupt, but wanting to show what she had learned. That's right. The Central Dons are sometimes known as Lorax. Nethertyne was just one small settlement amid the Lorakian Delta. Nethertyne was the most remote village in the valley, and also the closest to our border. A troubling fact, if it were true, the Crushan army had dared to quarter troops there. Riding hard on the dirt path, we saw the signpost for Nethertyne and Sunkenstead at the crossroad. Sunkenstead is further north, on the edge of the Sawjaw swamps. We knew it was unlikely the bastards would try to make it that far. We steered our horses towards Nethertyne. Up the road, we found a man dead in the mud. Presumably a rider, said Rowan. That met the killers. Likely they're sharing a horse now, making better time, I said. But with the extra burden, it's possible we'll catch them yet. The village appeared from the fog. There were only a few rustic houses along the main path. I and Rowan slowed our pace. If what that Don told us back there was true, we could be walking into an ambush, said Rowan. Wouldn't be the first time. Yes, I know, replied Rowan. That's why I felt the need to mention it just now. Fool that I am. I ignored him and rode ahead. The village buildings were tightly clustered at its center. We don't even know if they're here, said Rowan. They are, I said. A horse stood at a nearby hitching post, abandoned. Could be a coincidence, said Rowan. At any rate, they've gone into hiding. We'll have to search building to building. We dismounted, leaving our horses at the same post. It could take all night. Not like they're just going to fall into our laps. I glanced sideways at my lieutenant. As I said, we had grown up together and fought many battles. Indeed, we had fought and bled on so many fields that I nearly forgot what we were doing at this particular spot. I'm not complaining, just commenting, said Rowan, misreading the look on my face. He added vigorously, we'll get those murdering bastards. And at precisely that moment, a dingy little man stumbled out of the latrine, not 10 yards ahead. After fumbling with his pants a bit, he looked up and saw the two knights staring at him. It was only then that we recognized the man, Grizz. He was a local Don conscript who had served in the Deltaic Legion for several years. It was only now that we realized the assassins we were chasing were from our own outpost. Traitors. Ah, shit, he said, before shooting across the alley. I have him, announced Rowan. I stood fast, half expecting all the dark doorways up and down the street to start expelling dingy little men rounding the latrine. Rowan sighted his quarry scrambling over a fence. Rowan dashed over the distance, but couldn't catch him. Grizz cleared the fence and crashed into the back of the house. Rowan vaulted over the fence and followed. The one-room dwelling was cluttered and dank. A young man, presumably the rightful occupant, all in his nightclothes, was quietly panicking in the corner. The front door stood askew, and Rowan pushed on. Coming into the street, he was confronted by his quarry. The dark-cloaked Grizz had taken a woman hostage, snatched from her bridal bed as he passed through the cottage. Rowan stopped short. He was frankly taken aback by the scene. The girl was young and small, and Grizz did his best to cower behind her, a knife to her throat. Vinian knights have a code, yeah? You come after me, and I'll kill this twer, young woman. The chosen people have a code, I said, approaching from the side, followed by the other heavily armed knights that had just arrived. Victory at any cost. You're all Vinians. You swore an oath. I know. You have a duty to protect the innocent. Scum like you know nothing of duty. The standoff might have gone on in any number of ways, having any number of possible outcomes. But as it happened, the young husband, recently bereft of his new bride, gathered his courage and came tumbling out of his house, up in arms with a garden rake, shouting and mad. He closed on the couplet. Grizz the traitor, his nerves strained, promptly stabbed his hostage in the back. She cried out and broke from his clutch. As he turned to flee, Commander Dweller, me, cut him down with my mighty sword. Here, Trek paused to brandish an imaginary sword, with all the weight and gravitas appropriate. Dex was impressed. The killing blow came just ahead of a vicious raking by the man in his nightclothes. Rowan, gentleman that he was, fretted over the young woman and tried to stymie the bleeding. The man with the rake, coming the long way round to his senses, ran to her aid. What have you done? He shouted. Oh, no, you call this imperial protection. He pointed a bloody hand at me and accused. You're supposed to protect us. Trek's throat seemed to catch on his words, and he was quiet for a moment. Then what happened? Is that when you met me? Urged Dex, thinking he might have forgotten like she did. I cleaned my sword of his dingy blood and calmly sheathed it. I said, I'm afraid it's all rather complicated. Trek was quiet again. He hadn't thought this through. This wasn't a good story. He wasn't the hero, but he couldn't stop now. Seeing, that a crowd had gathered and the woman was receiving the best care she could hope for in this place, I signaled for my legionnaires to circle up. There was only one place noisy enough not to have noticed the scene in the street. The local tavern was rowdy with merriment. I had my soldiers spread out around the building, while I and Rowan went through the door. By the time the old door clacked shut behind us, we realized the bar was full of Crushan soldiers. There was an awkward pause as the room reviewed us newcomers, but this was neutral ground, and there was cheer among the white-clad troops. One bold Crushan raised his mug and bid us welcome. Rowan spotted a mug of mead and answered the greeting with a hearty draught. The celebration resumed. I scanned the room for the missing traitor, while Rowan scanned the room for barmaids. This assassin, having noticed Rowan and I the moment we walked in, gauged the odds and found there were at least twice as many Crushans as Josen. He knew he couldn't count on the soldiers' outright protection. He also knew he faced torture and death at the hands of the Josen. As I began to circle the room, the assassin, more or less pretending to be drunk, sat down at a crowded table. Wasting no time, he remarked to the nearest white soldier, "Bless these Jodans for their hospitality, eh?" The soldier ignored him. He turned to the next. "Jodans don't mind one way or other. Like a proper whore, they'll have you. Orange or purple." The merrymaking went on around the table. Men and women gambling, drinking, and joking. "That's right," said the traitor. "Crushan or Josen, just as good. A good Crushan man can fight and fuck and sing just as good as any Josen can." The soldiers, hardly minding him, chuckled with modest approval. And the Josen, well, they're good too. Those Vinian knights now, whoa, haha, they're the real deal, you know. Oh boy, I bet they've killed hundreds, no thousands of whites. I be bet not one of you Crushan sons of Saw don't have a brother or a sister, or a cousin at least, that wasn't killed by a Vinian. A few of the soldiers were paying attention now, but Crushan lads, do they hold a grudge? No, sir. No, sir. They don't mind one bit. A Crushan lad, he knows his place, and don't make a fuss over things like that. The assassin, seeing his speech having an effect, went on. "Now, hold on. I'm not saying anything here. We all know the Jodans are neutral. They don't favor one side or the other, except to join the Legion now and then. So let's just keep the peace here, like we've always done. Whites know their place. They know they don't upset the council over petty little things. No, sir, not a Crushan soldier. Isn't that what the Jodans always say? That the whites don't fight back, no matter what the Josen do. So, let's keep the peace here." "Was it true?" asked Dex. "What's that?" "That Vinian knights killed Crushan brothers and sisters?" "Yes, it's true." "Oh, of course, many Crushans and Josen had been killed, back and forth and so on for a century, and that, if you thought about it, they were certain to know of someone, or someone who knew someone that had been killed in the conflict. And so it was that one white soldier stood and turned towards me. At that tense moment, the young husband, still holding his rake, came through the door. "They killed my wife. It's their fault." He pointed at Rowan, who was barely visible beneath two barmaids. I was half a crowd away from the door. I put up my hands in a peaceful gesture. "Get 'em," someone shouted. The tavern turned upside down, and everyone was at war. The waiting legionnaires stormed through the doors and windows. The Crushan soldiers were caught unprepared by the armored soldiers. A general fracas ensued. I, reluctant but capable, sliced through two assailants while spotting the assassin fleeing through the kitchen. I pushed by the bodies and pursued. I emerged just ahead of the outpour. The fight in the tavern spilled into the streets. A riot began. The whites and the legionnaires battled eagerly. The dons of the village tried to stop both sides, as a fire started along the main strip. The Crushans, believing the dons had joined the Josen in ambush, began killing in panic. "Burn the village, traitors," was heard repeated in the night. I came out the back, but had lost sight of my quarry. Rowan was pushed backwards out the window and rolled to his feet. His golden armor was battered and muddy. He looked at me, but I wasn't worried at all. So he added for emphasis, "We'll be destroyed for sure. This is madness." Upon hearing the words of their lieutenant, the legionnaires drew into formation around us. shoulder to shoulder or back to back. They awaited orders. We were outnumbered by the white soldiers that poured into the streets from wherever they had been quartered. "Yep, we're screwed," said Rowan. I made a series of grunts. My soldiers understood. We were going to fight to the last. "Always fatalistic," Rowan sighed. "Don't let him escape." He drew his sword. I hummed a simple tune as the Prussian garrison mustered. Tension mounted as loud marching clanked in the dark, and the scrapes of heavy equipment were heard moving up the street. The town was being overrun by crush. Horns and drums sounded in the distance. I knew I had made a tactical error, and likely all my soldiers would die as a result. Nethertyne was supposed to be a neutral town, but the townsfolk had collectively, quietly, sided with the crush. Soon, the entire street was ablaze, creating catastrophic damage to the simple wooden structures. Deadly arrows ricocheted in wild, random patterns. The legionnaires scattered and ducked behind storage bins and mud houses. Arrows hit several who screamed and staggered through the smoke, holding injured limbs and faces, undercut by flame. The building behind us collapsed in a violent plume of fire. I faced Rowan, and while not apologizing, I admitted I should have known better. The remaining legionnaires stood their ground on the main street. Trek stopped there. He didn't seem to have any more to say, but Dex was sure there was more to the story. She could almost picture it. She urged him on. What happened after that? What happened to the legionnaires? Trek took a deep breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He swallowed hard and sat down next to Dex. A figure emerged from the blinding light of the blaze. The 7-foot-tall Lord of the Crush made his way into the street. The white troops stood aside. "General Dragger," says one soldier, Raider of the North. His entire body is obscured by flowing black robes and a hideous mask with 2 large tusks jutting out from the bony jaw. "Yes, I saw him," said Dex confidently. His dark attire stood in stark contrast to the pale white armor of the Crushan soldiers. Everyone instinctively backs away from the imposing warrior, and a stillness sweeps through the town. Several of the Dawn troops break and run in a frenzied panic. "But not you." "No," Rowan said to me. "They're heading in this direction. What are we going to do? We'll be flayed alive and rolled into the salt bottoms of..." Before he could finish his thought, I moved away. "Wait, where are you going?" The bloody, accusing hand of the groom weighed heavily in my mind. I saw an avenue of escape and decided to save the lives of my soldiers rather than force a fatal standoff. I and the few that remained dashed down the alley. Just outside the tavern, General Dragger stood amid the broken and twisted bodies of his foes, a gigantic warhammer resting over his shoulder. He grabbed a wounded legionnaire by the neck as an Imperial officer rushed up to him. "Our brothers are not in the tavern." Dragger squeezed the neck of the soldier, who struggled in vain. "Where are those men you intercepted?" Dragger lifted him off his feet. "What have you done with them?" "Ah, this is a neutral village. Then why were you attacking us?" The man refused to speak, but eventually cried out as Dragger squeezed his throat, creating a gruesome choking and snapping. Dragger dropped him and turned to his troops. "Rip this place apart until you found our agents and bring them to me." The Crushan soldiers, more terrified of General Dragger than of the burning village and Vinian knights, scattered into the streets. "What's the plan?" urged Rowan as we wound our way down the alley. "We fight our way out. Eloquent as always, sir. We're not giving up. Here we go again." An eruption of fire, this time very close, sent dust and debris through the narrow alleyways. "I regret nothing," winked Rowan. On the main square, the few remaining Josin were pushed backwards. This is why the white soldiers are called the Crush, because their sheer numbers are overwhelming. The typical Crushan soldier is a farmer or slave, forced to fight for the glory of Grithora. For the Vinian knights, there is no glory in winning or losing against them. For the most part, the individual foot soldiers of the Crush had no stake in the contest, except to do what was demanded of them, and one day return to whatever province they called home. The few legionnaires guarded Rowan and I. Rowan pulled me away as we fled down an alley. I protected protested, yanking my arm free. I'm too old to run, let's fight. I'm too young to die, let's get out. The sentry from the watchtower, seeing that the Josen were doomed, called out to the nearest Crussians. There goes 2 more. The Crussian captain halted his men. Hold your fire. General Dragger wants them alive. In the alley, Rowan and I vanished amid the smoke and rubble of the burning village. That wasn't so bad. Think we lost him? I shook my head. We'll have to lay low as long as we can. Trek exhaled a heavy breath, as if he had been holding it the whole time. Dex waited eagerly for the next adventure, but none was forthcoming. Fearing she was repeating herself, Dex asked, "Then what happened?" "That's it. That's when we met you digging through the ashes. Did all that really happen?" "More or less." "And that's when you got shot?" "Yes." Dex thought about it. She didn't want to forget anything ever again, and as she raced to tuck away, she accidentally recalled something else. "Dragger said you were a witness." "What's that mean?" "That he's insane." "But what did he mean?" Trek stammered and cleared his throat. "You know what a witness is, right?" "Of course I do," said Dex. "It's someone who sees stuff. Dragger wants someone to see what he does." Dex furrowed her brow for a while. "You're making that face." "What face?" "I don't make faces." "Yeah, you do. It's like this." Trek scrunched up his eyes and nose. "If I make faces, it's because you don't make any sense." "What was unclear?" "People see each other all the time. What's the big deal? Do you see Dragger now?" Dex was about to answer rudely, but was suddenly very nervous and looked around the dark chamber. "No, I can't see shit." "But so what? You can't see him either, so what makes you a witness?" "Maybe I'm a witness. Maybe Runty is a witness." "You have got to be the sassiest little girl in the valley. Just my luck." Dex shrugged. "People come and go in life. They live and die. Right now, outside these walls, life goes on. My family probably thinks I'm dead. The Crussians are moving closer to the border, and I'm stuck down here. But the sun still shines. The grass still grows. It's like none of us really matter anyway." Trek let out a long sigh, then saw Dex making that Dex face again. "I don't mean... It's just... Nobody has the whole story. The story I told you, it's just what I saw. What I remember, what I chose to tell you. I could tell you anything I wanted. Dragger knows that. He knows he can tell anybody anything he wants, and they have to believe him. Because if anybody says different, he'll kill them or lock them up. But that also means nobody knows the whole story, and that's what he wants. He wants someone to know the whole story, and I've known Dragger almost his whole life. Probably longer than anyone. Why does he care what you think? Hey, thanks a lot, Lumpmelon. I happen to be a very important man." "Oh," said Dex with a sideways glance. "I don't know what that madman wants. He wants to suffer. He wants all of us to suffer. I don't want to suffer anymore. Why is he so mean? I don't want to do this anymore. There was something else I wanted to tell you about the day we met. I was barely conscious, but I remember what you did when the Crussians caught up with us." "What did I do?" "There was a young captain there. Liren Cad, I think. I had met him before at the Imperial Council." The captain saluted and gave the briefest glance towards Dragger's feet. Dragger looks down and for the first time realizes there's a little girl squared up to him. "The squadron had brought you back with me, and no one had bothered to shoo you away." You and Dragger stared at each other for a long time. Dragger raised his warhammer, and I thought he was going to crush you with one stroke, but you stared through him, your body trembling from the cold, but otherwise calm. "Aren't you scared of me, Piglet?" Dragger said to you. You looked at him blankly. He knelt down till you were face to face. You asked back, "Are you scared of me?" Dragger tilted his head curiously. You knocked on his mask with your knuckles, still burnt and bloody from digging in the debris, leaving little red splotches on the white bone. "Can't you remember what you said?" Dex shook her head, embarrassed. "You said, 'Why are you hiding under there?' I remember that clearly. I guess I wished I could have said that to him. But here was this little girl, just staring right through him. Dragger picked you up by your hair, thick and tangled, and he walked away with you. Why? I don't know." Over the following weeks, Dex could only count the passage of time by her dreams. Her life consisted of waking on her mat, soaked in sweat and tears, with no recollection of what had transpired in her mind, stealing or fighting for food, running and dancing with Runty, stories from Trek of strange and distant things, followed by another round of nightmares. Early in the morning, just at the height of a bad dream, Dragger appeared in her apartment.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.